Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader back with you, the Nader Narrative on Jersey First TV. What is the focus and future of the Republican Party? We are really at a crossroads in a lot of ways with both parties, and you can have a lot of opinions about that, but you know for sure that the Republican Party is seeking to redefine itself in some ways and figure out what its base looks like and what its future may be. And it's interesting to talk to people who represent what might be the new face of the Republican Party to understand their view and understand what they think is in store for the Republicans after all we have been through really in the past decade. And one of those individuals who I think you're going to enjoy hearing from is somebody that you've seen on the campaign trail in the recent congressional race. And depending on where you live in New Jersey, you may know a lot about him or just a little. But let's bring to the show Bob Healey. Bob, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
Well, we saw you wrote an op-ed recently, which made us kind of want to talk to you further, but it's not like you're new to this. You ran for Congress in the 3rd District, which gave you, of course, not only statewide recognition, but some national recognition as well. Sadly, you didn't win, although it was a valiant effort. Not easy in New Jersey as a Republican to run for Congress. Out of the 12, we only have 2 who've been in for a while representing the Republican Party. But Bob, we're going to talk about that experience, but I want to start with this recent op-ed that you wrote for the New Jersey Globe. And it was really based off of your experience going to the Republican debates recently in Milwaukee. Give us a highlight, give us the top line of what it was like to be there.
Well, I tried to write it from a perspective of what it's like sitting in the seats, because it's an arena of about 10,000 seats at the Fiserv Arena out in Milwaukee. And, you know, that's a very small slice of the entire base that gets to go. And so you can watch it on TV and you can form your own opinions about that. But if you've ever been to a sporting event and seen it on TV and been at the arena or at the ballpark, it's totally different. And that's sort of the feeling I tried to convey. And one of the things that I don't think maybe comes through so much on television with these debates, and particularly this debate, because they don't do it so often in every debate, is the crowd. Yeah. There's a crowd there. And that crowd, I can tell you, being a candidate and doing debates, no crowds in those debates. 2 Zoom debates. There's maybe a chat box that I'm not reading or not supposed to be reading. Right. And so you're sort of left with your own thoughts. But having, been in front of crowds, been on the campaign trail, their feeling, their reaction can influence your reaction, can influence what you say. And I have to imagine that it did that for some of the candidates that were up there. Yeah. And it was a truly singular experience. I felt really honored to be there and to watch sort of the sausage get made for this upcoming presidential debate.
I think it's fascinating. Of course, I watched it from New Jersey, right? And first of all, you're right. There was a lot of crowd reaction. Now, not every debate is like that. Sometimes they purposely tell the crowd, you can't react. But there was a lot of reaction. And what I found interesting is you couldn't necessarily guess from the crowd's reaction who they were supporting or not, because at times they would kind of go all in with something that I thought they wouldn't like, and other times there was a lot of booing. So let's talk about 2 of Jersey's own, which are looming large, which would be Christie, and we're going to say Trump because obviously he's a big deal in New Jersey in terms of his businesses and his residents. First, let's talk about Christie. How did you think he performed?
Well, I think, having lived in New Jersey under 8 years of Chris Christie, seeing him in debates, and when you become a candidate, by the way, when you go to take candidate training and debate training, there's like 4 Chris Christie videos in that debate training with the NRCC. The guy's good on his feet, whether you love him or hate him. He's good on his feet, and he's had even more practice since he's been governor. I would say that, I think the governor probably went in there thinking he might be that bull in the china shop that we've sort of come to know and either love or hate in New Jersey. Sometimes it's both. And I think he audibled. I think he audibled in the debate, particularly, as I said in my op-ed, if you had given me $1 million, I wouldn't have told you that Mike Pence would have tried to punch Vivek Ramaswamy in the face. I mean, right? I remember grabbing the person I was with next to me like, did that just happen?
Right.
And so I think when that happened and the debate started to get a little out of hand, the moderators had a real challenge in trying to use that bell to get people to stop. I think he audibled, and I think he made a decision to try and be the guy who seemed maybe more presidential and less of the bull in the china shop up there. That being said, he still had his trademark sense of humor. I mean, he got the UFO question, which again, if you had given me a crystal ball, like again, I turned to the person on my right at that point who I didn't know, but I was like, are they serious?
Yeah,
that's a debate question.
that's a debate.
And
yeah.
and he showed his trademark sense of humor that he's got. So I think that he got the third most amount of speaking time in the debate, which is important if you're a candidate trying to figure out how you ended up there. He certainly got booze. Got booze. You know, his thing is that he has a very strong opinion on Donald Trump. And being from New Jersey, I can appreciate a strong opinion,
right?
Whether you agree with it or not. But those boos then turned into cheers later on for him. So to your point, it was like, wait a minute. 5 minutes ago, this was the worst guy in the room. Now you're cheering him.
Right.
So that crowd is just, it's just this factor that when you're in the stadium, or when I was in the stadium, you could tell who was cheering for who and who was booing for who. It became very clear. But I'm sure it was a little confusing on TV.
It was. And I think if you take it in total, it was hard to walk away from that and say, okay, where do the Republicans stand? I mean, if we look at the polls and we say, you know, the elephant in the corner, who wasn't there, of course, Trump, and we see the pure numbers, and we know that right now, if the primary were tomorrow, he wins. Maybe toss up with Biden right now, but you know, right now he's clearly far ahead. But it really wasn't clear from watching that where the party is going. There was a lot of Vivek support, and then there wasn't. There was somewhat allowing Pence to do certain things, and there was a clear, that some people are upset with him. And then there was this Christie love-hate. So if you take, and then we've got Nikki Haley, you've got a lot of interesting factors. So if you look at that holistically, how did you walk away from that and sort of process it and say, okay, where are we going from here, and what kind of Republican Party is this right now?
I think the important thing to remember about these debates is we'll have 3 of them. So the next one will be on the 27th at the Reagan Library. So there's a lot more topics to cover that didn't get covered this time. I mean, you've only got 2 hours, and you've got, several people up there on the stage. It's not a one-on-one heads up debate. I would say that I walked away, honestly, a little disappointed, not at the candidates up there necessarily, but I really came saying, I know something about some of these candidates. I know less about others. And what I really hope to get from this is starting to understand just a little better, knowing there's 2 more debates to go along, where they stand on certain issues, so that I can then make up my mind when the primary rolls around in New Jersey. And because of, I think, several factors, it was hard to really wrap your arms around a lot of the people on that stage and where they stood. The moderators, I gave them some crap in my article. The moderators had and so it was really, really difficult just to wrap your arms around where the candidates stood. I'll tell you this much. I think that Pence showed some fire that surprised me, that I was not expecting. I think that, Vivek, for the first half hour, was the darling on that stage. He said things, people cheered, the crowd went wild. He had his own cheering section. It was up in the left-hand side. Nikki Haley's was in the right, by the way. DeSantis was behind. So like everybody had their section. Right. And but I would say right around the discussion on the Ukraine, there were 2 points where I think he became no longer the darling. The first was his comment about everybody up there being bought and paid for. Didn't go over well. I don't know how it went over if you were watching at home on TV. In the crowd, it didn't seem to go over so well. Right. And all the other candidates bristled on the stage. You could see that. And then the Ukraine thing, the discussion of foreign policy on the Ukraine, even before Nikki Haley really sort of gave him that jab to the face, there was a lot of booing. And there were people next to me in the crowd that you could hear when he made that comment about Zelensky being a pope and people going back to their boards on Lockheed or Raytheon. There were people in the crowd who I could hear who said, "Oh, come on, man. Like, knock it off." Right. So I think it wore thin a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see how he maybe shifts his tactics come the 27th.
Well, and that's what we notice, right, is the evolution of a candidate. And it's interesting. I think they each played a certain role. And you're right. I can tell you from watching it, Vivek felt like he took it a step too far. It was effective in the beginning, and then it became kind of polarizing to the point where it took away from everything else. But they each had a job. And I think the sense was that Christie's job was to, punch at Trump as much as possible, but he was punching, of course, across the stage as well. Pence needed to defend himself, and he's very much in a defensive mode in some ways. Did you feel like Pence, this is a feeling I had, I felt like he was speaking in like 1980s political jargon. It felt very staid and very stale and almost written for him, some of those lines he delivered.
I've had the good fortune to meet Mike Pence twice. Both times I found him to be a really affable, genuine guy. Whether his lines were written or not, I don't know. But I would tell you that it does seem, to your point, the title down here on the bottom of the screen, what is the future of the Republican Party? Mike Pence, and to a lesser extent, I think Asa Hutchinson, seem to harken back to that Republican Party of the 1990s, maybe the late post-Reagan Republican Party. And you really sort of got the sense of that when they talked. And on the other extreme, you've got a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy, who is this different part of the Republican Party that maybe we didn't see so much before Donald Trump, or wasn't so much in the forefront and in the spotlight before Donald Trump.
Right.
Disappointing for me in particular, who I was hoping to hear more from, was Tim Scott. He's got a great backstory. I just don't think he had a chance to really talk about it in that forum.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that Doug Burgum, as I said in my op-ed, he gets the honorable mention award, because that guy blew his ACL out the day before. And I spoke to Chris Christie afterwards, very briefly. Because I saw Chris Christie help him down the steps when all the lights went off and everything shut out. Burgum was in front of him and he couldn't make it down the steps. And so Christie gave him an arm and they got down the steps. And I saw them both walk off, and I said hello to the governor. And I said, how's Governor Burgum? He said, in between breaks, I walked up to him and he said, "Chris, I've been standing on my right leg for an hour and a half with 90% of my body weight, and I chose not to take painkillers. That might have been a mistake."
Whew. Wow. The things that you don't see. Yeah, I think we all took that for granted. I mean, that's unbelievable. So what's interesting in all of this for the different personalities, I want to point out, you talked about Vivek. He represents a part of the party overall that maybe is new in terms of their ability to have a voice. I think he says things people want to say, and maybe then he says too much. But, he's young. Now, I want to bring you into this because you recently ran for Congress. You come from an established family who's had a business success in New Jersey and beyond, obviously, but you kind of came at it with your own flavor. We were talking before we started taping about just your personality and what you brought to the table, and it may not be what people would consider to be a traditional conservative, whatever that is. And that, during your campaign, you wanted people to see the flavor of who you are. So who are you as a conservative, and how does someone like you fit into this whole party?
I had the good fortune of having, parents that built a business in a state where it's not easy to build a business in New Jersey, particularly a manufacturing business. And I saw the ups and downs that government policy can play in a business, even a business that's housed in just one state out of the 50 that we've got. And so I sort of have a very early memory of what government overreach looks like, and I've never forgotten it. First time I ever saw my father sweat during the luxury tax in the late 80s. 2008 was a rough time for everyone. Yeah. And so that sort of never left me. And wherever life took me afterwards, I toured in a punk rock band. I would say that that's probably not if you're a political consultant looking at a candidate, that's probably not the thing you want to see when you get their opposition book back.
Sure. Or you do.
So,
maybe you do.
Or
Bob,
maybe you do. I argued it was a strength as far as I was concerned. So, I toured in a punk rock band. I teach yoga on the side, and I've practiced yoga for over 10 years. It's been great for my body. It's been great for my mind. There's a whole lot of benefits for that.
Yeah.
And I've also run this company for the last 10 years, been involved with it for 15. And I never saw the two really at odds. I never saw them. They were just me. And I think if there's one thing that I would say about who I am and what that has to do with the future of the Republican Party is that I think we often forget that people are complicated. Like there's what the media will print about you, particularly if you're a candidate. And there's the way that you can get pigeonholed when you put yourself into the public eye. But this is why shows like yours, Elizabeth, long form podcasts, those sorts of things, they're very, very important to political conversation, because then you can really get to know somebody. You can really get to understand what their background's like. You can really get to understand where they come from. And you learn that just like you think your life is not simple and complicated, so is theirs. And so, look, I'm a small government guy. I don't think the federal government should be able to come in and tell you what to do unless there's a really good reason. And I think I'm a small government guy down to state governments. Maybe it's because I live in New Jersey and we all get very tribal about the part of the state that we come from. Like,
sure.
Apparently Central Jersey exists now.
Apparently.
I wasn't aware of that.
Big thing.
I lived in the South. People lived in a different country called North Jersey. And occasionally, we would cross lines, but now there's Central Jersey.
Yeah.
It's like the former Yugoslavia. They made a new country in the middle of New Jersey.
Apparently we did, yes.
So like and so all throughout that, I think that if you're going to put yourself out there as a candidate, if you're going to get involved politically, you should try to find forums where you can have longer conversations than just a 5-minute soundbite. And going back to being small government state, small government local. I mean, when you look at some of the things that are happening just here in New Jersey on the local level, where the state government has just come in and said, this is the way it's going to be. That's why we have local government. That's why we have local land use and zoning boards. That's why we have local school boards. That's the way the system was set up, to be able to cater to different communities so they can govern themselves.
Yeah. Local is everything. And I think the good news in that is that you can have an impact. Not everyone's going to get a chance to run for Congress. Not everybody has that kind of vision, but everyone can find something locally. And it could even be an HOA that you live in, or it's school board, or it's just PTA. But we all sort of have to recognize that we point our fingers up pretty high to president, to governor, very important roles. Yes. But so much is happening every day on a local level. And as an American, you have the ability to impact that. So it's so important, and it's so different. Bob, I'm sitting up here in the country of northern New Jersey. You're sitting down in the country of southern New Jersey, and they're really very different. And in some ways, if I'm you, I'm probably a little frustrated that Trenton doesn't look more like me, because we know that the South is more conservative to a large degree, but that doesn't necessarily show itself overall collectively in our government in Trenton. So local. So having said that, what do you think your plan is, though? Because you reached for Congress. Now that's big. And obviously you felt inspired to do that. And we thank you for doing that. We need good candidates, and we need to continue to do that. What do you think the next step is for you?
Right now, I'm focused, to your point, on local races. We've got state races coming up. Low voter turnout on these state races, which is a shame. It makes me a little sad. You don't have to be a political junkie to be concerned about state races, because, frankly, I would say that commissioners, they used to be freeholders, they wield more power than some of the people in the state legislature.
Agreed.
So it's super important to know who is running your local government.
Yeah.
To your point, those are the races where, you don't need to be able to fundraise millions of dollars.
Mm-mm.
You don't need a whole staff. You don't need any of that stuff. You just need a will and some good people in your corner and some good ideas and some passion.
Yeah.
And you can really make a difference. And you can make a difference to your neighbors, which can be very, very gratifying. So I'm focused on those local races. I'm focused on some of the Senate and legislative races and helping some people out who helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people don't see when they run, I think, is you get, and I got told this, politics is tough. It's cold. It's cutthroat, particularly in New Jersey. When I would meet candidates from other states, they would go, "You run in New Jersey?"
Yeah.
Oh,
Ouch.
God, man. I'm like, really? Maybe it's because I've grown up here. You're just used to getting, punched in the face and people trying to take your legs out from under you. But
Right.
one of the things that you don't see is that there's a lot of really good people in political circles that want to help you.
Yeah.
That want to give you a hand up, that'll take you under their wing when you're the new guy in the room and introduce you to people, not because they want something from you, just because they're glad to have somebody else who cares riding alongside them. So I'm trying to be that person for some of these local candidates. I've met a lot of great people through my time doing this. So now it's my turn to do for them what was done for me.
I love that. And you can make a big difference. So we're looking at November here, which is more important than people realize. And you're right, it's depressing, the low turnout, but we've got to change that. The opportunity to take back the Assembly or the Senate, it's not going to be easy, but there are some districts that are potentially winnable. And then, of course, we have all the school boards, and we've done really well in that area, we being more the conservatives, even though that's a nonpartisan race. We know who's more conservative that's running. And so we're doing well in school board. I think commissioners, I agree with you, Bob. I sometimes see stronger commissioner candidates in terms of their makeup than Senate or Assembly candidates. I mean, I see some impressive people at the commissioner level. They have a lot of power, don't they?
They have a huge amount of power. They run your county, and the way New Jersey's set up, the county runs like its own fiefdom in some ways. So super, super important elections.
So that's important. We've got the chance to change Trenton. And as we look at that, and then we go into 24, and we're all very aware as we started this interview, what's at stake in 24. Don't know where that's going to go, but we know what's at stake. And of course, we have some Senate races and, of course, congressional again. Then we get to 25. Where is Jersey heading? Do you think it's time for us to finally see another Republican governor? Do you think it's in the cards? And what is it going to take to get to that point?
I think that's a hard question to answer. And better than I do, Elizabeth, that 2 years or even however many, it's a lifetime. I mean, when you in politics, the things that makes politics for me exciting and interesting and fun is that things can change overnight. I mean, if you want to talk about the presidential race, Joe Biden could die. Donald Trump could die. They're both older men. I hope neither one of them does, but that could happen. So I think with 25, with the governor's race, the first question you have to ask yourself is, who's president of the United States?
Right.
Because that matters a whole lot, as we know in New Jersey. And we don't have the answer to that question yet. And anybody who tells you that they do have that answer, I want to meet them, because I'm not a gambling man, but I might become one if you can figure that one out for me.
No.
So I think the question is, who's the president of the United States? And until we know that, I don't know where we're going in 25 yet.
There's a general feeling in New Jersey that you obviously picked up on during your campaign. It's probably one of the reasons you decided to run, is this just sense of, let's get our lives back. Overall, let's get our lives back as Americans, and that our liberties are really at stake. If we don't have an outcome that changes who's in power, are you one of these that says, like, this is it? This is the last election nationwide? Is it that serious to you? Or do you think we can come back from potentially another loss?
And I've met people on both sides of the aisle, by the way, that want to tell you that this country is headed for disaster. We're in a bad spot. I'm an optimist, Elizabeth. I'm a history nerd. I love history. I did reenacting for years, and I read history books as a kid. Yeah, you can put that one on the unusual.
I didn't know that about you. Wow, that's new.
Gotcha. I
Okay.
did Revolutionary War reenacting for, oh gosh, 20 years.
I love it.
And so particularly with that time period, this nation has gone through some really dark times. I was thinking about that earlier today. If you were sitting in Congress or even local government, state government during the Civil War, like, you would have thought this whole thing was over. So I think it gets really dark when a nation goes through a period of change, when it goes through some gyrations. And if you're living in it, it seems like forever. So that's why I think it's important for us to zoom out, to gain perspective. And when you zoom out and you look at all the challenges this nation has faced, I think we're going to get through this one too. Yeah. And I think we're still going to be the best place to live, raise a family, and to build a business and to do all of those things that we want to do in our life. But to your point, it's a question of what's that going to look like? Yeah. What kind of liberties are we going to have? What kind of liberties are we going to lose along the way? But I tend to be an optimist, and I think we're going to get through this. And I think 20 years from now, I'm going to look back. It's going to be one of those things where I'm sitting at a table saying, man, yeah, that was a rough time. Yeah. You guys don't know how easy you have it now. You didn't live through the 2016 and the Biden-Trump rematch, and right. or not the Biden-Trump rematch, not, the Biden Vivek Ram, or the Kamala Harris. Who I don't know who it's going to be, but yeah. But I'm an optimist, and I think we've still got some really great days ahead of us.
Well, that makes you a big patriot, because I agree with you. When you look at the history of this country, you can't help but be an optimist, because there's really no way we exist, right? From the very get-go, it's just incredible that we pulled off what we did. So I think the message there is that in the DNA of every American is the desire to live free, and really, honestly, the desire to fight for those things that matter. We just need people to show up. That's the clarion call, isn't it? Show up.
It is. And I will tell you that one of all of the cheering in that stadium, of all of the jeers, of all of the go Nikki and make America Florida and Vivek and whatever, or the boos or whatever you heard, the loudest cheer, and I'm not being silly about this, the loudest cheer that you heard was in the beginning, during the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance.
I love that.
And that gives me a lot of faith. That tells me, you know what? We're going to make it through this. Yep. We're going to make it through this. If that's the thing that still gets the loudest applause and the standing ovation, we're going to make it through this.
I love that. And you know what? I could talk to you more, but I'm going to end on that, because it's optimism that everybody needs. Bob, it's so great to talk to you. We have to have you back, and we need to hear your voice more in New Jersey overall. I hope you can continue to guide the party and inject this optimism into people, because, New Jerseyans, we have a tendency to be kind of cynical, and we could take a little bit of that once in a while. So stick around, Bob, stay involved. Please let your voice be heard, because we need people like you.
I'll be back anytime you want to have me, Elizabeth. Very appreciative.
Awesome. All right, Bob, thank you so much. And to my audience, guys, we'll see you next week.